I have lived 100 years on this earth. I have buried a husband. I have buried a son. I have watched fortunes built, and I have watched fortunes crumble. I have sat at kitchen tables where women cried over bills they couldn't pay, and I have sat at other tables where women laughed because they finally felt free. And after all of that, after 1 full century of watching, living, losing, and learning, I can tell you with absolute certainty that the difference between those two kinds of women had almost nothing to do with luck. It had everything to do with what they knew, and more painfully, what they didn't. I am 100 years old, and there are things I understand now, sitting in this chair, that I would have given anything to have understood when I was 35, standing in my kitchen, thinking I had all the time in the world. I didn't, and neither do you. So before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If what I'm about to share saves you even one financial mistake, even one sleepless night, 1 decade of unnecessary struggle, would it be worth 3 minutes of your time to subscribe to this channel? Just press that button. Because the women behind these videos have dedicated themselves to making sure you walk the road ahead with open eyes. I walked it half blind. You don't have to. Now. Let me tell you what I know. I was 35 years old in 1959. My husband Harold worked at the steel mill. We had 3 children, a 2-bedroom house with a leaky roof, and a savings account that we were very proud of. $412. We thought we were doing well. We thought we were being responsible. We thought that because we weren't in debt and we weren't spending wildly, we were safe. We were not safe. We were simply unaware of how unsafe we were. And that is the first great mistake I made, the one I would walk back to in a heartbeat if time would let me. I confused the absence of disaster with the presence of security. I thought that not losing money was the same thing as building wealth. It is not. It never was. And for women especially, women who were told for generations that money was men's business, that a good wife managed the household and left the finances to her husband, this confusion was not just common, it was almost universal. Here is what nobody told me at 35. Every single year that your money sits still, it is actually moving backward. Inflation is not an abstraction. It is not something that happens to other people or other economies. It is happening right now, every single day, quietly eating the purchasing power of every dollar you are not actively growing. When I was 35, a loaf of bread cost about 20 cents. Today, that same loaf costs $4. If you had taken $100 in 1959 and buried it in your backyard, truly just left it there, today it would buy you what about $8 bought back then. That money would not have stayed still. It would have shrunk, quietly, invisibly, while you weren't looking. And that is exactly what happened to so many women of my generation. We kept our little savings accounts. We felt responsible. We felt careful. And the whole time we were slowly, gently, politely going broke. Not with a crash, not with a scandal, but with a hush. The women I watched thrive in their 70s and 80s. And I've known some extraordinary women in 100 years, let me tell you. They were not the wealthiest women at 35. They were not the ones married to the richest men. They were the ones who understood early that money must be put to work. That a dollar saved but not invested is a dollar on a slow train to nowhere. Now I know what you are thinking because I thought it too. I don't know enough about investing. That world is complicated. I could lose everything. And yes, you could make mistakes. I made mistakes. But I want you to hear me very carefully on this, because I am 100 years old and I have earned the right to be direct with you. The mistake of doing nothing costs more than the mistake of doing something imperfectly. I wish someone had sat me down at 35 and said, "Eleanor, you do not need to become a Wall Street expert. You do not need to read financial textbooks. You simply need to start. Put something, anything, into an account that grows, even if it's $20 a month, even if it's 10. Start the habit. Start it now. Because time is the one ingredient that no amount of money can ever buy back, and right now, at 35, you have an ocean of it. I had an ocean of it. I let it evaporate while I kept the house and raised the children and told myself I'd figure out the money stuff later. Later came. I was 62. Harold had passed. I had the house, the leaky roof long since fixed, and a savings account that was still very politely, very quietly, not enough. I do not say this to frighten you. I say it because I wish someone had frightened me, just a little, just enough to make me move. The second piece of this first chapter of wisdom is one that no one, spoke about openly in my day, and I'm not sure enough people speak about it openly even now. You must understand your own financial life, not your husband's, not your father's, yours. I loved Harold. He was a good man. He worked hard. He never gambled. He came home every night. But Harold handled the money. I handled the home. And when Harold died, suddenly, on a Tuesday morning in November, I discovered that I did not know where anything was. I did not know the name of his pension contact. I did not know what accounts we had, what they were worth, or what I was entitled to. I sat in a chair very much like this one, with a shoebox full of papers, and I felt, for the first time in my adult life, completely and utterly helpless. I was 67 years old, and I was learning from scratch how money worked. Do not do this to yourself, please. Whatever your situation, married, single, widowed, divorced, know your numbers. Know your accounts. Know your income. Know your debts. Know what you own and what you owe and what you are owed. Not because you are planning for loss, but because knowledge is the only financial protection that no market crash, no husband's death, no economic shock can ever take from you. If you are married and your partner handles the finances, I am not asking you to take over. I am asking you to be involved. Sit down once a month, ask questions, understand, because the moment may come, and for so many women it does come, when you will need to stand alone in a room with a shoebox full of papers, and the difference between devastation and stability will be whether or not you know what you are looking at. That is what I know from Chapter 1 of my 100 years. Don't let your money stand still. Don't stay on the outside of your own financial life, and don't wait for later, because later does not negotiate. It simply arrives. Now we move into the second chapter of what I wish I had known. And this one is perhaps the most painful for me to share, because it touches not just on money, but on pride. On the stories we tell ourselves, on the way we convince ourselves, very cleverly, very comfortingly, that everything will work out if we just don't think about it too hard. I call this the retirement illusion, and I walked inside it for longer than I care to admit. When I was in my 40s and 50s, retirement felt like something that happened to other people, older people, people who were winding down. I was busy. The children were growing up. Harold's hours at the mill changed. My mother got sick and I became her caretaker. Life was full and loud and demanding, and retirement planning felt like a luxury, like something you did after the real emergencies were handled. The emergency, of course, was that I wasn't planning. Here is the truth about retirement that I needed someone to tell me bluntly, without softening it to be polite. The money you will need to live on for potentially 20, 30, even, as in my case, 40 years after you stop working, will not appear simply because you worked hard and meant well. It must be deliberately, consistently, and sometimes uncomfortably built. and the window to build it is not as wide as it feels when you are young. It narrows, quietly. The way a sunset narrows, you look up and suddenly the light is almost gone and you didn't even notice it going. Many women of my generation relied on one of three things for retirement: their husband's pension, Social Security, or their children. I want to talk about all three of these because every single one of them is shakier than it looks. Harold had a small pension from the mill. When he died, my survivor benefit was a fraction of what his full pension had been. The system was designed, and I say this without bitterness but with great clarity, for men. For men who would collect for a few years and then die. Not for women who live longer, who often earned less, who often stepped out of the workforce to raise children or care for parents, and who arrive at retirement with half the savings and twice the remaining years. Social Security was similarly designed around a model of a working husband and a dependent wife. And while it has evolved since my day, the underlying math still disadvantages women who spent years outside of the paid workforce. I collected a spousal benefit. It was not nothing, but it was not enough. It was never enough. And the children, my three beloved children, had their own mortgages, their own struggles, their own families to feed. I would sooner have gone without heat than told my daughter I couldn't pay my electric bill. But there were months where that was nearly the choice in front of me. Depending on your children for financial stability in retirement is not a plan. It is a hope. And hope is beautiful, but it does not pay utility bills. So what should I have done differently? What do I know now, sitting here at 100, that would have changed everything if I had known it at 40, at 50, even at 55? I would have started a retirement account in my own name as early as possible, and I would have treated it as untouchable. Not the vacation fund, not the emergency fund, the retirement account, sacred, locked, non-negotiable. Even when money was tight, especially when money was tight, some amount, however small, would have gone into that account every single month. I would have understood compound interest not as a concept from a textbook, but as a living, breathing force that works for you or against you depending on whether you engage it. When interest compounds over decades, even small amounts become extraordinary sums. A woman who puts away $50 a month at 35 and never touches it will, by 65, have accumulated something meaningful, not because $50 is a lot, but because time is. Because compound interest is silent and relentless and patient in a way that very few human beings manage to be. I would have refused to cash out any retirement savings early. This is something I see many women do, something I did once myself during a particularly hard winter. And the true cost of that decision is almost never visible in the moment. You see the amount you're withdrawing. You do not see the compounded future value of what you're giving up. You do not see the tax penalties eating into it. You see a lifeline. What you're actually doing, more often than not, is borrowing from your 75-year-old self. And that woman, let me tell you, will not thank you. And finally, in this chapter, I want to say something that I never heard a single soul say to me for the first 7 decades of my life, and that I believe needs to be said plainly and without apology to every woman watching this. Your retirement is not selfish. Planning for yourself is not selfish. Putting money aside for your own future, before you help your adult children, before you fund everyone else's needs, before you say yes to every request that comes with a hand outstretched, is not selfish. It is survival. It is sanity. It is, in fact, the most responsible thing you can do for the people you love, because a woman who has planned for herself is a woman who will not become a burden, who will not call her children in panic, who will not have to make impossible choices between medication and groceries in her 80s. Put your oxygen mask on first. I know you have heard that. I know it is almost a cliché now. But I promise you with 100 years of evidence behind that promise, that it is the truest financial advice I ever received, and I received it 50 years too late. And now we arrive at the third chapter. And this is the one I saved for last, because it is the most intimate, the hardest to talk about, and in my experience, the one that matters most of all. It is this: you must make peace with money. I know that sounds strange. I know it does not sound like financial advice. But after a century of watching women navigate wealth and poverty and everything in between, I am convinced that the deepest retirement wealth mistakes are not strategic. They are not about the wrong investments or the wrong accounts or the wrong timing. They are about the relationship women have with money itself, the stories they were told, the shame they carry, the silence they were trained to keep. I grew up being told that money was not a topic for polite conversation, that a woman who talked too openly about finances was crass, unladylike, grasping. I was taught to be grateful for what we had and not to ask too many questions about where it came from or where it went. Money was Harold's territory. I managed the household budget, the groceries, the children's shoes, the occasional new curtain, and I was very good at that. But the larger financial picture, the investments, the saving strategy, the retirement planning, that was a world I was quietly but firmly told did not concern me. And so I didn't concern myself with it. And that cost me dearly. The shame around money, around not having enough, around not understanding enough, around having made mistakes, keeps women silent when they should be asking questions. It keeps them from walking into a bank and asking for an explanation. It keeps them from calling a financial advisor and saying, I am 60 years old and I am starting from almost nothing and I need help. It keeps them from talking to their sisters, their daughters, their friends about what they actually have and what they actually need. And that silence, that dignified, well-mannered, devastating silence, compounds just as surely as interest does, only in the wrong direction. I want to tell you about a friend of mine. Her name was Vivienne, and she was the most elegant woman I have ever known. Vivienne always had beautiful clothes and a beautiful home, and she spoke about money with complete confidence, as though she had always had plenty and always would. When her husband died, we discovered that Vivienne had almost nothing. The house was mortgaged to the edge. The beautiful clothes were bought on credit. The confidence had been a performance, a flawless, exhausting, decades-long performance, because Vivienne was more afraid of being seen as poor than she was of actually being poor. She spent her last years in her daughter's spare room, and she never once admitted to any of us how frightened she had been for most of her adult life. Vivienne broke my heart, and she taught me more about money than any book ever could. The performance of wealth, keeping up appearances, spending to signal security you don't have, avoiding conversations about finances because they might reveal how little you know or how little you have, is one of the most expensive habits a woman can maintain. And it is so deeply, so culturally ingrained in so many of us that we don't even recognize it as a habit. We think of it as dignity, as pride, as just the way things are done. It is not dignity. It is debt with good manners. Make peace with where you are, even if where you are is not where you wanted to be. Especially then, because you cannot build from a place you refuse to look at. You cannot fix a problem you are too ashamed to name. You cannot ask for help with something you are pretending does not exist. If you are 50 and you have almost nothing saved, say so, out loud, to yourself first, and then to someone who can help. If you made financial mistakes in your 30s or 40s or 50s, spent too much, saved too little, trusted the wrong person, ignored the right advice. Let those mistakes be what they are, lessons, not life sentences, not proof of some fundamental inadequacy, lessons. The most expensive lessons are always the most useful ones if you are willing to learn from them. And talk about money. Talk about it with your daughters so they do not arrive at 60 carrying the same silence you did. Talk about it with your friends, because I promise you, the women you think have everything figured out are often just as lost and just as scared as you feel. Talk about it with financial advisors, with counselors, with anyone who can help you see clearly. The conversation will feel uncomfortable for about 30 seconds, and then it will feel like air, like actual, necessary, life-saving air. I am 100 years old. I made every mistake I have described to you today, and some I haven't had time to mention. I arrived at 67 with far less than I needed, and I spent the next 33 years learning, adjusting, simplifying, and, eventually, feeling, for the first time, genuinely at peace with my financial life. Not because I became wealthy, I didn't, but because I stopped pretending and started understanding, because I finally looked clearly at what I had and what I needed and what I could do, and I did it. It is never too late to look clearly. You have something I no longer have, and that is time. Not infinite time. Not the kind of time that allows for indefinite delay and endless, I'll start next year. But real, workable, precious time. Time to start a retirement account today. Time to sit down this weekend and understand your own finances. Time to have the conversations you have been avoiding. Time to break the silence that has cost so many women of every generation so much. Use it, please. Use every bit of it. And if this conversation meant something to you, if even one thing I said landed somewhere real, then subscribe to this channel and share this video with the woman in your life who needs to hear it. Your sister, your daughter, your friend who never talks about money but you know is struggling. Send it to her. Because the greatest financial gift we can give each other is not money. It is knowledge. It is honesty. It is the willingness to say, here is what I learned the hard way, so you don't have to. I have lived 100 years, and this is what I know. She looks into the camera for a long, quiet moment. Then she smiles, that same unhurried, unperforming smile. Don't waste a single year of the time you have.